Well, here we are at the National Religious Broadcasters Association, their annual convention in Nashville, and we meet all kinds of fascinating and interesting people, many in the space of education and thought and theory, and we met such a gentleman here just a little while ago. David Richardson is the author of this book called Transparent: How to See Through the Powerful Assumptions That Control You. And David, it's great to meet you in person. Thanks for stopping
Chris,
by.
thanks so much for having me on the show.
Of course, welcome to Making the Leap. We are always interested in people in the education space and how they're doing it a little bit differently. Your book, endorsed by great folks like Eric Metaxas, my colleague of radio. Tell me a little about your concept. This was fascinating, and I'm too simple to explain it. So please.
No, that's all right. What we've been doing is we've developed a specific system to teach people critical thinking.
And by we, you mean at the Assumptions Institute?
At the Assumptions Institute,
okay.
Yes. It's an organization that I founded that was born out of 40 years of experience doing apologetics. Starting when I was a high school or a college kid trying to explain my faith to my best friend who was an atheist and getting shot down.
Wow.
And then started reading and learning the skills that eventually I was a researcher for Josh McDowell. I was on the staff of Campus Crusade for Christ for 30 years and working with college and university professors for most of that time. So people who are leaders in thinking and leaders in education, the people that run the education system are university professors. And how do I reach them for Christ? How do I get them to teach truth from God and the Bible in a state university classroom? Can I come up with any reliable method to do that? And I did.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So you mean that through your study, through the principles in this book, how do you mean you reach people, say an atheist professor? How might you reach them through this kind of book?
Well, what I would do is I would challenge their basic underlying assumptions. The thing is, every person that you meet starts from a basic assumption about reality. You can't help it because we're limited humans. There's things that you know and things that you don't know. We live in this reality and we can't get out of it to see what it is completely. So we just know it in part. When you spend any time with somebody, even a 4-year-old, they're gonna ask you why. And then you'll say, well, it's because of this. Well, then why is that? Well, it's because of that. Well, eventually you hit the wall.
Yeah.
you reach a place where you'll say, I don't know, it just is.
Yeah.
Everybody gets there eventually,
Yes.
Even atheists do. And when you reach that place of what you know and what you don't know, you have to assume something to be real and therefore true that you don't know. Because if you knew it, you wouldn't have to assume it. But we all eventually get there. And that thing that you assume is the thing you do not question, because if you do question it, you can't make sense of anything. It's the thing that you cannot prove because it's not provable. And it's the thing you accept to be real and therefore true on faith.
So this ultimately comes down to, as you and I were talking before we started rolling today, this comes down to everybody believes in something even when they claim to believe in nothing. Believing in nothing is believing in something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've done this with atheists. One of the king atheists of my county where I live, we were having a discussion in the local Starbucks, and he just hated the fact that I told him that he assumed something because he's a person of reason, and also that he was a person of faith. Oh, he really hated that.
Yes.
And after a variety of different angles at it, I finally said, "All right, that laptop you've got sitting in front of you, is it physical or not?" And you could see the wheel spinning in his head. So, well, that was out of the side alley there. How do I answer that? Because if I say that it's physical, he'd say, prove it, and I wouldn't be able to. But if he said, it's not physical, he'd say, prove it, and I wouldn't be able to. So he said, I don't know. And I said, you're absolutely right, you don't know. And when you reach the edge of what you know and what you don't know, you have to assume something you do not know, that you do not question, you cannot prove, and you accept on faith. You make a basic core assumption on faith, just like I do. You just start with something different.
So I asked you, is this driven by your personal faith, or does this concept help people teach faith? And you said it really doesn't start with that, but it sounds to me, as I hear you talk, like ultimately that's where anyone of faith would wind up. You basically, I don't want to say it this way, you wouldn't say it this way, but you can also almost back anyone in a corner with their assumptions or their lack of faith.
Yes. Well, actually, no. That's the whole point, is that the basic assumption you make about reality is your faith commitment. So it's this myth that there's such a thing as religious neutrality, that there are people of faith, which is how we as Christians often talk. I'm a person of faith. as if there are people not of faith.
Yep.
That's not true at all.
Uh-huh.
Everybody is a person of faith, just people of different faiths.
Yes.
And when you understand their core assumption, you know what their basic faith commitment is.
Yes.
And then you can evaluate it based off of my critical assumptions test and see how that faith commitment falls out in various different questions like, where does everything come from? How does everything work? What is a human being? How do we acquire knowledge? What is good? What is humanity's basic problem? Based off of the core assumption you make that you don't know, you don't question, you can't prove, you'll answer those questions differently. And when you get the answer to that, it reveals what their core assumption is and whether or not it's true, because true things match real things and real things are true.
I often find that it's science. You know, my daughter is in Christian school. She's a freshman. And I often find that in middle school and high school Christian schools, they will often find when they go out in the secular world, they're confronted by the science
Yes.
We read in the Bible. And that probably is the area of the Bible that's most challenged by the secular world, wouldn't you say?
And in many respects, yes.
Yeah. And so, again, just applying your book, Transparent, is this the kind of thing where you could start engaging people directly on things like boiling it all the way down to a cell and how it, you know, who created that and where does that come from? I mean, the complexity of human life or the atmosphere or the universe. I mean,
actually, you don't have to get into those weeds.
You don't?
No, because let's say you've encountered somebody who believes that the nature of reality, their basic assumption, is it's just physical only stuff. All there is matter and energy. There's nothing non-physical like minds and spirits, God. No, none of that's real. That's tooth fairies, Easter bunnies, and leprechauns, you know, as far as they're concerned. None of that's real. The only thing that's real is physical stuff. Well, if that's true, then how would you answer the question, where does everything come from? Well, you'd answer it, everything comes from natural laws. It's the natural laws that made everything. And so then how would you answer the question, how does everything work? Well, it's the natural laws that make it and the natural laws that run it. But the problem with that is the laws are tied to the universe. If there's no mass, there's no gravity. If there is no energy, there's no conservation of energy. So which comes first, the laws or the universe? That's why Stephen Hawking wrote his book, A Brief History of Time, trying to solve that problem, and he couldn't.
Wow. This is fascinating. The book is called Transparent, How to See Through the Powerful Assumptions That Control You. This is recommended reading for who specifically, would you say?
It would be somebody roughly high school on up.
Uh-huh. And this is meant specifically to arm someone to go out into the world to challenge.
Yes. What we're doing is we're revealing the world of assumptions that everybody makes, and I decode how they work, what they are, and how to detect them using a tool called the Critical Assumptions Test. And it's automated with a phone app. So then you download the Transparent app from our website, learntodiscern.com, onto your iPhone or your Android phone, and you can practice it as you're watching TV shows and movies, as you're listening to a lecture in a classroom, or as you're reading a web post, an article, social media, whatever. Whether you read it, watch it, or hear it, you can evaluate it using the Critical Assumptions Test, surface the underlying assumption, and you can immediately know whether it's true or not and why, and you can do it with some practice in 20 to 30 seconds.
Wow, critical thinking. Imagine that. There is such a thing still. David Richardson has literally written the book on it, Transparent. Nice to meet you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me on.